There is a mountain range in the heart of Europe, stretching nearly 1,200 kilometers from the Mediterranean coast to the vast Hungarian plain. And that mountain range has done something that no empire, no treaty, no border drawn on paper could ever do. It divided Europe, not with war, not with politics, but with rock, ice, and gravity. But here's the strange thing. The 8 nations that live around these Alps don't just survive in spite of them. They thrive because of them. Swiss chocolate, Alpine cheese, the Winter Olympics, ancient trade routes, centuries-long border disputes all stem from one single thing: the geography of the Alps. So how can a mountain range be both a barrier and a bridge? A dividing wall and a cultural foundation? This is not a simple question. And the answer will make us look at the map of Europe in a completely different way. Let's start where it all begins. If we look at a map of Italy, the northwestern Ligurian coast seems like any other Mediterranean shore. Palm trees, cliffs, fishing villages, sunshine. But just behind those last coastal hills, the land begins to rise abruptly, violently, and astonishingly. This is where the Alps begin, almost right at the water's edge. And from that seemingly modest starting point, the range will rise, widen, and curve eastward, forming a crescent-shaped arc that embraces Italy's Po Valley to the south, before stretching through France, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Austria, Germany, Slovenia, and reaching the Hungarian plain in the east. But the Alps are more than just a wall of rock. They are the drainage system for all of Central Europe. From the peak of Monviso in the southwest, the Po River begins its journey eastward, collecting meltwater from almost the entire southern slope of the Alps before emptying into the Adriatic Sea. The Rhone River flows west into France and the Mediterranean. The Rhine flows north to the North Sea. The Danube flows east to the Black Sea. 4 directions, 4 seas, 4 civilizations. And they all begin from the same mountain range. This is not a coincidence. And it's not just pure geography. Because where there is water, there are people. Where there are people, there is power. And where there is power, there is conflict. But before we get to those conflicts, let's look at what the Alps do better than any other mountain range on Earth. Create beauty so undeniable that no one dares to argue. Along the French-Italian border, a double line of national parks was created to protect the fragile, high-altitude ecosystems, from the pine forests in the valleys to the lichens clinging to the highest rocky peaks. But right next to those protected areas, France operates some of the largest ski resorts on Earth. Les Trois Vallées, La Plagne, Tignes. These names are not just places. They are symbols of a deeper conflict that France, and by extension all of Europe, is facing. How to preserve nature while also exploiting it. That's a question we'll return to. But first, there is a specific mountain we need to talk about. Before 1860, the Barre des Écrins, at 4,101 meters, was the highest peak in France. But then France annexed the region of Savoie, and with it, the Mont Blanc Massif. And Mont Blanc changed everything. Not just because it's taller, not just because it's more beautiful, but because it became the center of one of the strangest border disputes in modern European history. France claims complete ownership of the summit of Mont Blanc, arguing that they have built the infrastructure, run the rescue services, and control access to the peak. The French side also has a stronger geographical argument. The village of Chamonix lies on the western slope of the Mont Blanc Massif, and from here, mountaineers have conquered the highest peak in Central Europe for over 2 centuries. Chamonix is so intertwined with the history of mountain sports that it was chosen to host the world's first Winter Olympics in 1924. But Italy disagrees with how France draws that border. Italy argues that the border should follow the main watershed, the line that divides the water flowing down either side of the mountain. And if that principle were followed, the highest point of the Mont Blanc Massif would be a shared summit, divided between the 2 nations, just as most other major peaks along the Alps are defined. 1 mountain, 2 nations, 2 ways of looking at the same geographical reality. And after more than 150 years, this dispute remains unresolved. But here's what's truly worth considering. While France and Italy argue about the border on the mountaintop down in the valley, the people of both nations are sharing ski slopes, hotels, restaurants, and breathtaking viewpoints. Geography creates disputes at the highest levels of power, but it also creates cooperation in the deepest layers of daily life. This isn't a unique case. And as we move eastward along the French and Swiss borders with Italy, the paradoxes become even stranger. Take a look at the Matterhorn. Its perfect pyramid shape has become an icon not just of the Alps, but of the entire concept of mountains in the human mind. People call it the mountain of mountains. But right next to the Matterhorn, the Dufour-Spitze tells a different story. This peak is named after general and cartographer Guillaume-Henri Dufour, who spent 2 decades mapping all of Switzerland using the triangulation method. The result was a 25-sheet map set that, for the first time in history, depicted every peak, every glacier, and every valley in Switzerland with astonishing accuracy. That might sound ordinary, just a scientific achievement, but it was actually much more important. Because as Dufour was measuring every mountain, every stream, every tiny village at dizzying altitudes, he was doing something that geography often does better than any political speech. He was turning a collection of mountain regions that spoke 4 different languages into a unified nation in people's minds. The Dufour map wasn't just a navigational tool, it was a nation-building tool. And this is where we need to pause for a moment and ask the question, why does Switzerland exist? Not as a legal question, but as a real geographical and historical question. This is a country with no sea, no significant mineral resources, no favourable location for large-scale agriculture, 4 official languages, and situated between the most powerful empires in European history. And yet, Switzerland not only survived, but it has become one of the wealthiest and most stable countries in the world. The answer, as usual, lies in geography. The Alps create natural barriers that protect Switzerland from the invasions of surrounding empires. But at the same time, the fertile mountain valleys, high-altitude meadows, and unique climate created the conditions for a unique economy to develop, raising dairy cows on the high slopes, producing cheese and chocolate, and more importantly, becoming a commercial intermediary for everyone who wanted to cross the Alps. But to understand why this intermediary position was so important, we need to look at one of the greatest engineering feats in the history of European transport. Throughout the Middle Ages, and right up until the 19th century, crossing the Alps by road was a dangerous and costly adventure. Merchant caravans had to wait for summer for the mountain passes to become passable. Armies had to choose their timing and routes carefully. The Brenner Pass, located on the border of Austria and Italy, was one of the few routes gentle enough to allow for large-scale traffic. The ancient Romans used it to move their armies and goods into Central Europe from the Italian peninsula. And today, nearly 1/3 of all road transport traffic across the Alps still passes through this narrow corridor. 1/3 of all commercial goods crossing the Alps through a single pass. That is true geographical power. But then things get more complex as we continue eastward into the Eastern Alps. Here, the peaks are no longer as majestic as in the Western Alps. While the Western Alps have as many as 81 peaks exceeding 4,000 meters, the Eastern Alps have only a single peak that reaches that threshold, Piz Bernina, near the resort of St. Moritz. But what's more interesting isn't the height. It's what lies beneath and inside these mountains. Imagine a cave system that stretches for 42 kilometers inside a limestone massif. The temperature inside is near freezing year-round, and water seeping through the dissolved limestone freezes almost instantly upon contact with the cold air currents, creating enormous ice columns that stand like towers in the darkness. This is the largest ice cave in the world, located inside the Dachstein Massif in Austria, and it exists for a very specific geographical reason. Cracks from when geological tectonic forces lifted the Alps created holes in the limestone, and a natural ventilation system, through various cave entrances, creates a continuous chimney effect, pushing cold air inside and keeping the temperature at freezing, even in summer. Nature has designed a giant refrigerator, and humans, of course, knew how to take advantage of it. Before electric refrigerators, ice from the Alpine glaciers was cut out and exported across Europe to preserve food. But now, the story is reversing. In the last 100 years, the Bernese Alps region has lost about half of its ice and snow volume. The glaciers today are thinning at a rate of about 70 centimeters per year. This number isn't just a climate statistic. It's a sign of a slow but irreversible crisis for the entire water system of Central Europe. And here's the crucial thing we often overlook. These glaciers are not just beautiful scenery. They are Europe's largest natural freshwater reservoirs. When spring arrives, the melting ice creates a steady flow that feeds major rivers like the Rhine, Danube, Rhone, and Po rivers that tens of millions of people depend on for drinking water, irrigation, and power generation. But as these glaciers disappear, so does that natural regulatory mechanism. Summers will become drier, flood seasons will become more erratic, and major riverside cities like Vienna, Cologne, or Rotterdam will face challenges that geography can no longer help solve. But there's something else the Alps create, something less pessimistic and far stranger than what we've just mentioned. While the world often thinks of national borders as straight lines drawn by humans, the complex terrain of the Alps has created border situations, so bizarre they make even geographers scratch their heads. On the German-Austrian border, there's a valley with a few villages that lie within Austrian territory, but the only road connecting them leads into Germany. This practically makes them isolated Austrian territories within Austria itself, at least in terms of road access. Just 40 kilometers to the north, another oddity appears. A piece of Austrian land juts out like an island, touching contiguous Austrian territory at only a single geometric point. This creates something akin to a quadrupoint, where four borders meet at a single point. In the entire history of cartography, this has only truly happened once, between Chad, Nigeria, British Cameroons, and French Cameroons in Central Africa, and it only existed for 8 months. These geographical paradoxes are not accidental. They are the inevitable result of humans trying to draw straight lines across a landscape that is anything but straight. And then, we come to the Dolomites. If the Western Alps are the stage for the highest peaks and border disputes, the Dolomites are where the Alps become beautiful in a completely different way. Sheer limestone cliffs, pale bluish-white, rise from lush green valleys like abandoned castles from some prehistoric civilization. That color is no accident. Dolomite is a carbonate sedimentary rock originating from the floor of the ancient Tethys Ocean, an ocean that vanished hundreds of millions of years ago. When tectonic forces lifted the Alps from the earth, they brought the seabed to an altitude of thousands of meters, and the unique fracture planes of this rock created vertical cliffs and sharp peaks with a unique shape found nowhere else in the Alps. But the Dolomites are not just geological beauty. They are also a story of how geography creates economy. Starting in 1974, 9 ski resorts in the Dolomites region decided to link together, building a system of lifts to connect the slopes and villages. 7 more areas joined later. Today, the Dolomiti Superski area covers a total of 1,246 kilometers of slopes, more than half of which are interconnected, and all are accessible with a single pass. It is the largest ski area on the planet, and in 2026, along with the city of Milan, Cortina d'Ampezzo in the Dolomites will host the Winter Olympics. This isn't the first time the Alpine region has hosted the Olympics. Of the 27 Winter Olympic Games that have been or will be held since the first one in Chamonix in 1924, nearly half of them have been hosted in the Alpine regions of France, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, or Austria. No other mountain range on Earth can claim that. And when we piece all of this together, a larger picture begins to emerge. This is the most important thing we need to understand about the Alps and their relationship with Europe. The Alps are not just a beautiful mountain range. It is a geographical machine that operates in multiple, contradictory ways at the same time. It divides, yet it connects. Mountain passes like the Brenner became crucial trade corridors, precisely because everywhere else was blocked. Scarcity creates value. It isolates, yet it protects. Because they are difficult to cross, the Alps have allowed distinct cultures to develop in isolated valleys, creating an incredible diversity of languages and cultures in a relatively small geographical area. It is resource poor, yet it generates wealth. Mountainous regions with no arable land force people to find other sources of income, from dairy farming, making cheese and chocolate, to financial services and high-end tourism. Switzerland is the prime example. It is nature, yet it has been shaped by humanity. From colossal ski resorts to the 57-kilometer-long Gotthard Base Tunnel, humanity has constantly tried to overcome, traverse, and adapt to the challenges set by geography. And here, we arrive at a final contradiction that no one has yet been able to resolve. The Alps are Central Europe's most vital natural asset. Its glaciers provide fresh water, its mountain forests regulate the climate, its ecosystems sustain biodiversity. But the very economic and tourist appeal that the Alps generate is destroying those very things day by day. Every new ski resort built is another encroachment on natural buffer zones. Every new tunnel dug further alters the flow of groundwater. Every busier tourist season adds more pressure to already fragile ecosystems. And while governments debate the border on the summit of Mont Blanc, while tourism corporations expand their ski resorts, while engineers dig ever longer tunnels, the Alps continue their own work, melting centimetre by centimetre, year by year, decade by decade. In the end, when we look back on the entire journey from the Ligurian coast to the Hungarian plains, from the 4,000-metre peaks of the Western Alps to the gentler valleys of the Eastern Alps, from the ice caves deep within the mountains to the bustling ski resorts on the high passes, we realize something that no map can fully express. The Alps are not a barrier or a bridge. It is both at the same time, and that very contradiction is why 8 nations, dozens of cultures, and hundreds of millions of people still revolve around it like planets around a star. But the real question isn't how the Alps created Europe. The real question is, as the glaciers continue to melt, as water levels change, as the climate rewrites the rules that geography established over millennia, can Europe continue to rely on the Alps as it has throughout history? And if not, what will replace them?